Have you ever been working on a piece of art, finished it, and stepped away for a little while, only to come back to that same piece and now notice all the mistakes in it? Hope you didn't already post it all over social media. Or maybe you've experienced it from another perspective. Mistakes like these are the art equivalent to your friend having some food stuck in their teeth, and you don't want to say anything, but you know you both are better off if you do. Mistakes are inevitable. Every piece of artwork will have imperfections, and that's totally fine. These imperfections or mistakes may even help your work, create more interest in it, and make it feel more human.
We don't make mistakes. We have happy accidents.
Those aren't the mistakes I'm talking about. I'm talking about fundamental mistakes. The ones you make, keep making, hold your art back, and ones that you might not even be aware of. Like if you try to draw a box in perspective, or try to draw eyes going in the correct direction, and not only did you do it incorrectly, but you can't even see where you did it wrong. The most obvious thing here is skill level, but why can some non-artists see the mistakes in experienced artists' work when they can't? Maybe you only see all your mistakes, but can't find the ability to fix them. There's common advice we can do, like take a break from your painting for a little while and come back to it with fresh eyes, flip your canvas or look at your painting in a mirror to get a fresh perspective, and so on. But I want to focus on the less obvious stuff, and there are two general psychology principles that I've found that I think contribute to this most. I'm not a psych guy, I'm an art guy, but if we looked at our art with a psychology perspective, what might we do differently? What if I told you that it wasn't your ability to draw that was the problem, but your ability to see? And no, it's not just because of your terrible vision. I mean, the ability to actually see and analyze what you're trying to draw. Tell someone who claims they're bad at drawing eyes, let's say realistically, to keep it simple, and they draw something that looks like a football or maybe even a little worse. But if you explain to them that's not actually the shape of the eye and break it down and show them examples, they'll probably say something like, "Oh, I never noticed that before. How could I not see that?" People tend to avoid difficult situations and anything that causes discomfort or negative emotion. It's a very natural thing our brains do to protect us from potentially harmful situations. But this doesn't have to be a tragic or life-changing event. It happens every day in our day-to-day lives.
Take the stock market, for example. Do you know when people pull their head out of the ground to look at their accounts, not to make a transaction, just to log in to check their account? So what you're seeing here in black is the S&P 500 over 2 years. And in gray is a number of times that people logged into their account just to check. And this is data from Carlson, Lowenstein, and Seppi. It's controlled for all the obvious confounds. So what do we see? So when the market is high, people log in all the time. Because positive information makes you feel good, so you seek it out. And when the market is low, people avoid logging in. Because negative information makes us feel bad, so we try to avoid it altogether. And all this is true as long as bad information can reasonably be avoided.
What if I told you were doing this in your art too? You may not be actively looking away from your work, but maybe you aren't analyzing it well for the same reason. You're avoiding a potentially difficult or negative situation. You want to be a good artist and be able to draw eyes well, so if you fail, it will cause a negative or difficult emotion. If you were to actually look deeply at the painting you just made that you're proud of, you may see some of the mistakes you don't want to see. This may lead to some uncomfortable thoughts, as you as an artist or worse, just as a person. But why would analyzing your art create such discomfortable feelings? Cognitive dissonance is a discomfort a person feels when their behavior does not align with their values or beliefs. A common example of this is someone who smokes but also believes smoking is dangerous and unhealthy. This is a contradiction between actions and beliefs. I wish I could find more research directly related to creatives about this topic like I did for the second topic, but all the examples were a little more general. Once again, not a psychologist, I just found this very interesting from an art point of view and felt like it was too good to not include. Dr. Carol Tavris is a social psychologist and author of the book Mistakes Were Made, but Not By Me.
Dissonance is, however, most painful. Not when it's just two cognitions that are in a crunch. Your best friend doesn't like the movie that you love most in the world. It's most painful when the dissonant information disputes how we see ourselves, when it challenges some belief that's central to our identity, or that questions a story that we have woven to explain our lives. When people do something that is inconsistent with something that's that important to them, they will be motivated to reduce the dissonance in a way that justifies what they did.
You may hear artists, or maybe you've done it yourself, where someone looks at somebody else's work and before they say anything, the artist will say something like, "Yeah, it's not that good," or "I suck. It needs more time," or just something along those lines. To avoid any criticism that that person might have, they beat them to the punch. You identify as an artist, or you think you're good at drawing, or at least want to be. You clicked on a video about seeing your mistakes, probably in hopes that it would improve your work. It's hard to admit that you might have shortcomings, or it could just be something simpler. Maybe you already think you know how to draw something, or you think you know what something already looks like, so you draw it the same way every time without questioning it. Or maybe you just think you can't draw hands. So every time you try, you just get frustrated and don't really try that hard, and then you don't see them for what they are, and then you just...
So in a sense, dissonance theory is a theory of blind spots, cognitive blind spots, of how and why we blind ourselves so that we fail to notice vital events and information that might make us question our beliefs, the decisions, the things we want to do.
It may sound crazy that this even has to be said, but you'd be surprised with how many people suffer with it. These blind spots can be quite literal. If you just accept that your skills aren't where you want them to be and start taking the steps to get better, what's left to cause discomfort? It's easier to just ignore this, consciously or unconsciously. Next time you're drawing something you think you can't, recognize that negative emotion, and don't be so worried about making something good or pretty that you can show off to other people, but try to actually understand what you're drawing. I feel as though there's two options here. Live in the delusion that the art you just made is the best thing ever, and then question why no one agrees with you, and why you haven't become incredibly successful yet. Or find a way to truly analyze your work without getting your well-being too wrapped up in it. This moment clicked for me a few years ago when I realized I wasn't even a fan of the art I was making, and I took a hard look at my art and really pinpointed areas I wanted to change and improve. This may sound like it's taking the emotion out of art, but it actually did the opposite for me. I was enjoying the process more and getting better results. Habituation in psychology is the process of a person's nervous system becoming used to stimulus so that the response to it diminishes or disappears altogether. Back to Dr. Sharratt from earlier. She wrote a book called Look Again, The Power of Noticing What Was Always There. I'm going to be referencing this book a lot throughout this video. To illustrate just how effectively our brains adapt, Dr. Sharratt says that if you walk into a bakery that smells strongly of fresh baked breads, studies show that you'll cease to detect the smell within just 20 minutes. Your olfactory neurons will have stopped responding because they stop responding to things that don't change. This is true for all our neurons. They stop responding, or respond less intensely, to things in our life which are constant. This could be things that brought us joy in the past, like a comfortable home or a new relationship, but we also stop responding to things that may have felt quite bad in the beginning. We adapt to them. Showing how quickly our brains adapt to anything shows the reason why we see our mistakes after taking a short break from our art. It's because it breaks that habituation. Spending so much time working on a piece, we become accustomed to it. If we walked away from the bakery for 20 minutes and came back later, we would clearly notice the smell again. Same goes for art. Habits tend to be thought in the long term, but short-term habits are very present as well. Habits are everywhere in our day-to-day lives. Some of them good, some not so good. Drawing is no different. You may have some bad habits that you don't even know about because you've become so accustomed to them. They're so familiar to you that you don't even notice them. This typically happens when you learn how to do something one way and never bother to expand or improve beyond that original lesson. This could be something as complex as drawing the human figure, or as simple as how you make your marks on the page. These are unconscious decisions that we make out of habit, possibly to our detriment. I learned how to draw faces through Andrew Loomis's How to Draw the Head and Hands book. It was a great way to learn, but I only really read it once, and then I drew heads the same way for years, never studying more and never really expanding upon that original lesson. And I guarantee there was a lot I didn't pick up through that first read. I stuck to what I knew and I did it the same way every time. My portraits plateaued and I couldn't progress. I had seen other tutorials or vaguely tried different approaches once or twice, but nothing really resonated with me as much as learning how to draw heads for the first time. Dr. Sharratt did research with a large tourism company and surveyed people on resorts to find out when they're most happy on their vacations. Her team came to the conclusion that people were happiest 43 hours into their vacation. It gave them enough time to settle in and focus on the fun. But from that moment on, joy started to dwindle. They still enjoyed the rest of their trip, but nothing really resonated with them as much as those first 2 days.
And we also asked them, hey, what was the best bit of your vacation? And there's one word that they used more than any other word, and it was the word first. The first view of the ocean, the first cocktail, the first time I built the sandcastle. Firsts were new and exciting. Now, the second view of the ocean was quite good, but it wasn't good as a first. The second cocktail, the third cocktail, even the fifth cocktail was quite good, but it wasn't good as that first cocktail. So the question is why? And the answer has a lot to do with habituation.
The first time I learned to draw heads and faces, it was new and exciting. But every time after that, it felt like I had already done this and knew what I was doing, so the new information didn't really connect with me. I kind of had already become stuck in my ways and accustomed to it. And since I had done it this way for so long, it was difficult to break this habit. I was expecting to do the same thing over and over again and get different results. It's much more comfortable to stick to your habits and do the things the same way over and over. But that's not where growth happens. It wasn't until I started to question the things I thought I had already known and seeking out new information and really fighting against the impulse to fall back on old habits did I actually improve. Sometimes when we force ourselves into a new situation that we think we'll only make mistakes in, do we actually do the opposite?
And how do we dishabituate? We change things up, right? We shake it up. We need to change our environment, change the rules in order to get people to dishabituate. Let me give you a very specific example. So on the 3rd of September 1967 in Sweden at 4:50 a.m., all traffic stopped and people moved from driving on the left side to driving on the right side. So Sweden did that because they wanted to align itself with the other Scandinavian countries around it. But of course, the fear was that that will result in many accidents, right? I don't know if you tried it, but it's very hard to switch the side of the road that you're driving in. But to the surprise of everyone, accidents went down by 40%, which is huge. So why is that? Well, if you've been driving for a while, you no longer feel scared, right? You feel quite comfortable and you don't pay as much attention and you might take more risk. But now you change the rules, anxiety, fear is triggered again, people attend more, and therefore they are more careful. Over time, of course, they habituated, and 2 years later, accidents went back to baseline.
Variety is the opposite of habituation because it puts you in a state of learning. Learning means change, and you can't habituate to change. When I feel like I'm hitting a creative wall or rut, I try to force myself to study an artist's work that I really like, that could be really challenging, or to seek out a new course or lesson or book, or just some challenge that could help me see things from a new perspective and give me the spark I need. We live in a time where information is endless in books and online, and a lot of your favorite artists probably have tutorials somewhere, or just have their work available to study. But you have to become aware of what you're doing. Don't just mindlessly watch or draw.
And often when I tell people about this kind of work, they ask, well, now that I'm aware of habituation, does that mean that it will go away? And the answer is no, it will not go away, but we can take actions, right, to reduce it. And it's similar to knowing about any other trick that our brain plays on us. Knowing about those tricks doesn't make them go away. They won't go away, but knowing about them means that we could perhaps change our actions in ways that are useful.
Awareness is the first step, but action is what is needed. Seek new perspectives, challenge assumptions, take breaks, and look at the big picture. Maybe it would help to see it from a non-art example, one that people probably aren't too familiar with. My favorite thing to do outside of art is surfing. I do it as much as I can. I'm not incredible or anything, but I love getting better at it. In surfing, there are a move called turns. There are different types of turns, but I'll keep it simple for this. It's when you go to the top of the wave and you do some type of, turn. This is a relatively simple move, but for some reason I couldn't get the hang of it for years. I would go out and try to turn the same way, time after time, and I would fall a lot. Until one day I came across a video explaining the proper way to do a turn. I'd seen tutorials like this before and they never really helped. But they said one thing, twist your upper body before your lower body, and I went back and looked at old videos of myself surfing and realized I wasn't doing that. The next time I went surfing, I tried it and everything just started to click. Every turn I did felt like the best one I had ever done. This simple detail changed everything and made this move so much easier. The excitement eventually started to wear off and I was left thinking, how could I have not known to do this before? How could I have not seen that this whole time? I watch surfing all the time, I go surfing a lot. How could I be so blind to this simple detail? How could I not see that before? Am I the dumbest person alive? I was expecting to get better at surfing by doing the same thing over and over. Every time I drew a face, I would use the same line for the brow, until I came across a video explaining that a straight line should really only be used when drawing the face directly front on, and an ellipse would be way better for any other positions. And it changed my art. Suddenly drawing faces became much easier in any position. I had drawn hundreds if not thousands of heads using that inferior method, and this one thing simplified so much for me. How could I have not seen that before? I was expecting to get better at art doing the same thing over and over. While writing this part, I came across this tweet from UFC legend Demetrius Johnson telling former champ Sean Strickland that he can't keep fighting the same way that he has been for the past 4 years. He has to switch it up if he still wants to fight at the top level. In order to get better, you have to swallow your ego and force yourself to evolve and learn new tools. We are human. There's only so much we can learn on our own. Seek information from outside sources through art communities, in person or just online, or just find the right videos for you. Sometimes the right piece of information that comes at the perfect time can do wonders. But if we're so stuck in our ways that we refuse to accept the new information, nothing will change. I know people who surf who refuse to look at themselves on video because they don't want to see how bad of a surfer they actually are. And artists do the same thing when they refuse to look at their work objectively. But doing this is by far one of the best things you can do to improve at anything. Art and surfing are both things you never stop learning. You never stop being a student. They are endless pursuits. Accepting this and acknowledging that you will forever be a student is the first step to endless improvement, however fast or slow. Art is hard, and it takes years to get good at. Imagine for a second you never lifted weights your entire life, and you go to a gym with people who lift all the time and have been doing so for years. You think, wow, I'm so weak. I'll never be able to get stronger. Pretty ridiculous, right? Those guys have been training their whole lives and you just started. I hope you guys are liking all these sports metaphors. But beginners in art do this all the time, comparing their art to professionals. If you try to draw hands and you do a terrible job and think, that's it, I'm just bad at drawing hands, suddenly you're hiding hands in your paintings in gloves, pockets, or just cropping them out altogether. Even if you do draw them, you're going into it with a mentality that you will not execute the hands drawing well, so you won't actually be able to see them for what they are. Instead of doing this, think of it analytically. What parts of the hands are you having trouble with? Palms, fingers, thumbs? How do my favorite artists draw their hands? Maybe I should study the anatomy of the hand or just simplify the forms of the hand to get a better understanding. Or maybe it's something different, where you just want to change your style from something a little less serious and fundamental to maybe something more stylized and cute, but you find yourself continuously falling back on old habits the moment things go south. Give yourself time to be bad at something in order to improve in the long run. This may sound like the simplest thing to do, but I've seen so many artists get stuck here. Avoiding exercise will not get you stronger, and avoiding drawing will not make you better at art. Put your ego aside and work on getting better. It's easy to tell someone to just practice more to get better, but if you're practicing the same way every time and not getting the results you want, maybe just being aware of some of the things I went over can help you out. For me, learning the science behind some of this really helps me put things into perspective. I understand that being so analytical all the time can be exhausting, and art most of the time by nature is an emotional thing. And being so robotically analyzing every detail could zap the joy out of the process. But scheduling out time of your day or week to work on the areas you know you want to improve can really go a long way. I'm trying my best to not sound like a corny self-help book, but there really are little things we can do every day or every time we draw that can help us make a little less mistakes. And sometimes mistakes are a sign we're improving. It is impossible to get better and look good at the same time. Give yourself permission to be a beginner. Being a beginner doesn't necessarily mean that you've never done something before, meaning you could be an expert at drawing characters but still a beginner at drawing backgrounds. Allow yourself to be a beginner no matter how good your characters are if you want to learn backgrounds. Get rid of the "I should be better" mentality and just start taking the steps to get better. Being able to see the mistakes in your past art is a sign that you're growing. We may not always be able to see our own mistakes, but the ability to learn from them and not being afraid to make them can be just as valuable. Thanks for watching. What are some of the stuff you guys do to help see your mistakes better or to help improve your skills overall? I'd love to hear in the comments below. If you like this video, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps out with me making more videos like this. This is definitely a different type of art video, so I hope you got something out of it, and if you did, I'm glad. Thanks again, and keep on making art.